Hi everybody, welcome to episode 6 of My Campus GPS Facebook Live. This is the place where we talk about how parents can help their high school student to prepare for university. And tonight we're talking about the very first thing you should do when you start the scholarship process. And part of this is talking about how to help your student get into the scholarship mindset. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about mindset later, but what is this very first thing? Well, the very first thing is to have the talk with your high school students. So not that talk, hopefully you've had that talk already, and believe me, if you can get through that one, and then you can probably get through this one without a problem. So I'm referring to the financial expectations talk. So tonight I'm going to share some ideas about how you might handle that conversation with your student. So I'm Janet MacDonald, and I am a former university admissions officer, and I help high school students and parents with the process of applying to university. So that includes university admission, scholarship preparation, and career exploration. So I help parents and students to avoid costly mistakes and to take advantage of opportunities. And that's really what we're talking about tonight, are these opportunities, and that's how I decided to discuss this topic tonight, because this week I spoke with two parents whose children had missed out on a golden opportunity for scholarships. So I say a golden opportunity because one of the cases in particular, the student, although no scholarships are, you're not assured to win any scholarships. In this one case, it was almost guaranteed in a way that the student would have a very good chance or actually win the scholarship if they had applied and put in a solid application. But and this award wasn't chump change either. It was several thousands of dollars. So in this case, both the child and the parent didn't really make this a priority. And we're all busy, and stuff happens, and the day-to-day happens, and the next thing you know, the deadline has passed and the opportunity has passed as well. So the opportunity, to have free money in the thousands of dollars that they didn't have to pay out of pocket or borrow and have to pay back with interest. So, that's gotta hurt, and I almost cry when I think about people missing out on these types of opportunities. And there are lots of reasons why it can happen. It can happen to almost anyone, but I don't want it to happen to you. So that's why we're here tonight. So I want you to be informed about the when, the where, the how, the why, and that way both you and your student know that you've done everything possible and given it your best shot. So even if you're not successful every time, you know that you've done your best, and in the end, that's really all we can do. So let's talk about the importance of mindset in this process. So mindset is kind of like our attitude towards things, or our attitude, and it can influence how we handle different types of situations in our lives. So like mindset or attitude can affect a person's performance, especially you probably are familiar with this, in sports, about how, having that kind of winning mindset can really affect the outcome for a lot of athletes in sports. It can also affect your child's attitude towards scholarships and paying for university in general. So I'm not sure if a positive mindset would have changed that situation that I just spoke about that missed opportunity that I just mentioned, but it might have. And I'm pretty sure of one thing, and that it wouldn't have hurt in that situation to have gone through this process that I'm going to talk about. So, and the information that I'm going to share is really kind of just general education fundings talk. So even if your student isn't currently searching for scholarships and applying for them, these ideas that I give you tonight can be just a way that you can kind of just convey your expectations to your child around funding their post-secondary in general. So our mindset or attitude can have a big effect, especially when we're talking about challenges and facing challenges. And that's kind of important here because the process of finding scholarships and applying for scholarships can be a bit challenging. It does take time and it does take effort. So this may be a bit of a challenge for your student. So this is where this mindset piece can really be helpful. So I'm calling this step 1 tonight of the mindset piece because there are a few more steps other than just this one. And I'll go over those, in future episodes, but this is the one that can be the first step or kind of like the starting off point. Now, I do want to preface this information tonight also with a statement that I am not a psychologist and I am not, a parenting expert or anything like that. And I definitely don't want to sit here and tell you how you should parent your own child, because you know your child best and you know what will work with him or her better than anyone else. So these ideas that I'm sharing tonight are just that. They're ideas that you can use. You can choose to use all of them. You can choose to use part of them. You can modify them in the way that you think your child would respond best, because you know your child best. So, but what I will say with some conviction is that mindset is an important kind of foundational piece of this whole thing, and it isn't one that, or I should say, I feel strongly that it's one that you shouldn't skip entirely. And part of the reason for this is because I actually did, an informal poll with some former clients and some parents, and 2 themes kind of came out of that. One is that they wish they had started a lot of these processes earlier than they did. And that's a really common theme that I hear with pretty much everything. And that's part of the reason why I'm constantly harping on people to take some of the stuff that you think you should start in grade 12 and actually take that back to grade 11 or sometimes sooner, because grade 12 is so busy that anything that you can kind of take off the plate of grade 12 and put into grade 11, you will thank yourself for later. The other thing that came out of this is that a lot of parents wish that they had been more frank and upfront with their students about the realistic costs of post-secondary, and they wish they had been a little bit more directive with them about the role that they expected their child to play in paying for some of the costs for university. So they wish they'd been more on board or had explained their expectations to the child a little bit more clearly. And so that's why we're talking about this tonight. So what's this first step all about? So this is, this having the talk with your child. This financial expectation talk means having a frank conversation with your child about the estimated costs of university and how they will be paid and by whom. So that's the basis of this talk. Now, I'm going to go through an example of some things that you can do, and just because it'll make it a lot easier, I'm just going to use like a really conventional nuclear family, 2 parents, 1 child. That might not be your situation. You might be a single parent. You might be a guardian of a high school student or something, so you might have to modify this a little bit. But just for ease of example, I'm going to use that situation. So if you are a 2-parent household, then the best thing to do, I think, before you have that conversation is to have a conversation with one another and make sure that you're on the same page in terms of your expectations. So how much are you willing to contribute, and how much do you expect your child to contribute? So you may have already decided a lot of this beforehand, but if not, then it's really important that you approach this as kind of a team, and you're on the same page before you start to talk to your child about it. So once that's figured out, then you can arrange a time to talk to your child about this. And you might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to suggest that you schedule it. I'm going to suggest you schedule it for 2 reasons. The first reason, of course, is because if we don't schedule something, it often doesn't happen. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because when you schedule it with your child, you're sending a message that this is important and this is a priority. And, we want you to show up and take this seriously. So I suggest that you schedule about an hour to do this. And because this isn't a conversation that you can kind of just start 10 minutes before they leave for soccer practice or something, that you want to give some time to go through this. So when you let them know that you're going to have this talk, you can tell them we'd like to arrange a time to talk with you about the cost associated with you going to university. And what we'd like to do is for you to put together a list of expenses that you think you will incur during your first year. So, this is the purpose of this is for the student to find the information and to kind of go through line by line and determine the costs, ballpark costs. It doesn't have to be down to the penny or anything like that, because the process of going through that will help them to, first of all, discover what the actual costs are, and it will help them to kind of understand those costs a little bit better, rather than you just kind of doing it for them and giving it to them. If they go through it themselves, then it will sink in a little bit better. So how do they get these costs? So each university will have something on their website, like a fee estimator or a fee calculator. So you can ask your student to search in Google by just fee estimator, fee calculator, and then the name of the institution that they intend to attend, or that they're thinking about attending. So again, the purpose is just to get that overall kind of cost for the first year, not down to the penny, but just kind of a ballpark figure. Now, what I will say is that some universities' websites are better than others with this, and some of them actually are really terrible. And with this fee estimator, fee calculator. The one that I really like, the one that I think is the best, is the one on the UBC website. So you might just want to suggest that they use that one as like a guide, basically. So the costs that they determine using the UBC fee calculator might be a little bit different than the one that, if they're attending another institution, but it'll be basically around the same. And that's what I say is the purpose of this, not to get it down to the penny, but just for them to start to think about what is the cost for tuition, what is the cost for residence, what is the cost for meal plan. And what I really like about the UBC one is that it actually factors in some of these other costs that you don't really consider, but that do actually add up in the end. So, for example, one of the costs that you don't really think about, but you will probably, or you might, or you probably will end up doing, is a move-in fee, or a move-in cost. And this is basically that trip to IKEA that you make where you buy all the new stuff for the residence room, right? So that's a cost that that isn't really factored into these things a lot of times, but it is probably, or it might be, a cost that you will incur and you don't really think about. So the idea is to kind of think about all of the different costs that might be associated with this year. So you can give your students some time to make that list of expenses, and then when you come together and you have your meeting, you can go over those costs and kind of add and subtract, you know, the different things and talk about them. Now, if your student is a bit anxious about this kind of stuff, so some students are really quite anxious about talking about the costs associated with things, you might want to do this together as a family rather than having them do it on their own and take it to you. But even if you do it that way as a family and you kind of go through the costs, calculating the costs together, if you can let your student do as much of the work as possible, then that would be good, because like I say, when they do it themselves, they're kind of more a part of the process, and they'll better understand and remember it. So basically I kind of think about students on this continuum. So you have students kind of on one end of the continuum who are quite nervous or anxious, or they think a lot about the costs associated with university, and they worry about it maybe, and maybe they've been saving for university since like grade 7 or something. And then you have the students on the other end who are kind of like oblivious. They don't really think about it at all. And they might hear about how university is expensive and stuff like that, but they really don't know what all of that means, and they really kind of haven't put much thought into it. But you know, most students are in the middle there somewhere, where they know that university is expensive. They might know a little bit about tuition costs. They might hear something about that, but they don't maybe know that much more than that. And they care that it's expensive and that they'll need to pay for it somehow, but they haven't really thought too much about the details of that. So that's what this talk is about getting into a little bit more detail about what that means so that they understand what that means. So once you have your estimated costs, then you can discuss how it's going to be paid. So this is obviously a very individual decision. Each family will determine how this works, and they'll all do it a little bit differently. But it's at this point in the conversation that you can bring up that you do expect them to help to pay for some of their university. And part of that expectation is that you expect them to do their part and do their best to find and apply for scholarships that they're qualified for. So you can, acknowledge that this is going to require some time and energy. It is going to require some work. Again, you're setting some expectation there that this is going to require some of your time. But it's important to get the message across that you will help them with this process. So you're letting them know that they're not alone in this, that you will help them as much as possible. So, it's kind of a balance that you let them know that you'll support them, but that you're not going to and you're not able to do the work for them, that they are going to have to actively participate in the process. So the next part of the conversation is, that you will assure them that you're there, that you'll take things step by step because you don't want to overwhelm them. And then maybe talk about a practical way that you can help them, just to give them an example of what you mean. So for example, it might be in terms of finding scholarships, that you will make a profile for them on scholarshipscanada.com, the scholarship database. And that you will take the matches that they match the profile with scholarships. You'll review them, and you will take any matches that you think they're eligible for, and save them and then discuss them with them. And for their part, they can ensure that they're checking in with the guidance office every week to find out about new scholarships that come up. So this is just an example of how you can show them that you will help them, but they also are going to do their part. So, you know, it's probably best at this point not to get into a lot of details about how this whole thing is going to work, but at least they get the picture that you're actually going to do this and to help them with it. So the impression or the mindset or the takeaways that you want them to leave with after you have this conversation. Obviously, you want this to be a positive conversation because you want them to come away with a positive mindset. But some things that you want them to walk away with after this conversation, there are three main things. So the first thing is that you want them to walk away thinking, okay, I've always heard that university is expensive. Now I know it's true, and now I know what the actual costs are and how they add up. And the second thing that they're going to come away with is that they understand that I am expected to pay a portion, to help to pay a portion of university, and wow, you know, they really mean it. Okay, it's not just lip service, they actually mean it. And the third thing is that I'm expected to put some real effort into finding and applying for scholarships. And that's going to be a little bit of work, but my parents are going to help me with that. And even though it's going to be some work, my parents are going to help me, and so it's not quite as bad as it sounds. So again, if your student is a bit on the anxious side, you really want to reinforce that whole, we're going to do this as a team, and I'm going to help you as much as possible, and kind of provide that bit of soothing that is necessary for those types of students. Because it's important that they know the reality. Like I say, this is one of the things that parents, you know, wish maybe they had let their children know, that a little bit more about this reality and what's expected of them, which is just basically to do your best to help out as much as you can. But you don't want to overwhelm them or frighten them, for sure. You don't want to frighten them in this situation. So that would just be defeating the whole purpose. Like I say, you want them to come away with the reality of the situation, but also feeling positive that this is something that we can do and I'm going to have help doing it. So when should this conversation happen? So if you follow me at all, you know that I'm going to say grade 11 or maybe sooner. So that's when you can get into some of this detail about the actual costs and what that looks like and who's going to pay and how that's going to happen and everything. You know, you don't need to do it any sooner than that, for sure. But the sooner that your child understands that what's expected of them, the easier this conversation will be when you have it. So if they've been, you know, kind of told all along that there is an expectation that you will be expected to do your best to try to help to pay for your education, then when this conversation happens, it's not going to come as a huge shock or a surprise. So my son has known since grade 6 that if he pursues post-secondary education, that he will be expected to pay a portion of that. Now, obviously, when he's in grade 6, we don't go into any detail about that, and this is definitely not done to frighten him. It's just really done more like matter of fact, like the earth is round and you're expected to pay part of your post-secondary costs. So again, you know your child best, and you know what will work with them and what won't, and how you should handle this situation. But I hope that I gave you some ideas of ways that you can approach the topic, and some ideas of how you can sort of get that balance of expectation and motivation to help your child understand the importance of paying a portion of their costs. So I'd be really interested to know from parents, if you've been through this process, How did it go? And if you haven't, then are these ideas some ideas that you think that you can use? And I'd like to know this, and I bet there are a lot of other parents who would really like to know as well. So if you would like to share any ideas in the comments about how you had this conversation with your child, or how you intend to have it, or if you have any questions about how you can approach the situation, then please ask or share in the comments below. And by all means, if you have any tips, I bet there'd be a lot of parents out there who would really like to hear from an experienced parent about how they handled this. So this is step one, like I say, about getting your child into this scholarship mindset. There are two other steps that I will cover in future episodes. So another step is to instill some confidence in your child, that they are able to find scholarships and apply for scholarships and win scholarships. So there is a lot of misinformation out there. There are a lot of myths about scholarships out there. So each one has a kernel of truth, but the majority of it is not true at all. So it's important that students and parents understand the lay of the land when it comes to this, but because confidence is a mindset piece as well. The other piece is about making a plan, and kind of the whole idea of teaming up and to make a plan or a strategy about how you're going to approach this. Because as the saying goes, you know, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So if you have a plan, the mindset part of that is when you have a plan, it gives you that motivation to follow through with your goals, because you have that set kind of steps for you to follow. You're not kind of overwhelmed by all of this information. So if you can get it into a bit of a plan or a strategy, then that helps to motivate you to complete the process. So I'll give you some practical tips about how you can do that. So that's it for tonight. I would really appreciate it if you found this information useful, if you could share it with another person who might benefit from it. I also invite you to go to my website and look at my blog, because I have a lot of really great free information on my blog, and that is at mycampusgps.ca/blog. So that's great. I hope you enjoyed that and got some value out of that, and I will see you next week. Thanks.